Ahead and start recording. All right. Yep. Keeping an eye on the waiting room, and I guess Joel and I will go ahead and get started and let people in as they trickle in. But this will be recorded for anyone to go back and watch. Just wanted to kick it off with kind of what we're going to talk about in chat today. We want to give just a introduction to what this whole space is and what this whole space is and what NFTs are and what the metaverse is, and then to go through kind of how we think about it as collectors, and then kind of some of the innovation that's going on with brands and what we think the future of the space looks like. So we got Joel here. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great to meet everyone. So Joel Ponce here. I am based here in Bentonville, pretty much, and been around the area since 2013 and really love the area. I will continue to stay here. I work at Paramount, so we do a lot of work with major brands. We also have our own IP. And last year I dove really deep into this space personally. It's been a ton of fun. I tell people all the time, I've never had so much fun learning. Lots of different areas of this to dive into. And Dana and I certainly had a good time talking through all that as we dove in and got, ready for the presentation.
Yeah. So I'm Daniel Fritchie, U of A alum. I'm also co-founder of Byzantium, which is a NFT marketplace for NFTs secured by Bitcoin. We're currently the largest one in our space, and started back in September with another U of A grad, actually, and have really kind of rolled out the business in December. So feels like it's been a long time, but it's been just a few short months, and have just been kind of neck deep in the NFT space since then.
And one thing you'll realize about the space quickly is how quickly it moves. So 1 week in the space feels almost like a year in the real world. So it does feel like a whole year is maybe a decade.
Yeah, I always joke with people that it's like that planet in Interstellar, where you're there for 15 minutes and you age 7 years on Earth. That's what it feels like. But it's fun. There's a lot of innovating things happening, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about. So moving on, just to give a high level overview of the space. Really kind of how we think about it is there are Web3s, where there's Web3, NFTs, and the metaverse. And all of it kind of creates this new exciting space that we're looking into. So Web3 is a broad term, and how I think about it is, it's basically the new version of the internet, as it kind of sounds. So in Web 1, you could basically just consume information. You had large companies like Yahoo and Google and other publishers that would put out information, you could consume it. Web 2, you had the ability to both consume and contribute information, so read and write information. And that, think of like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, where you could also be a content creator instead of just a content consumer. But you didn't own any of your data. You couldn't take it from platform to platform. You couldn't take your profile on Twitter and port it over to Instagram. You had to start over a whole new, profile there. And same thing, Joel and I were kind of talking about this in video games. If you played FIFA from one season to the next, as they release new games, you couldn't take your character and whatever items you might have bought for your character and use that in the next year's game. You just had to start all over because you didn't own it. And so now Web3 allows you not only to read and write, but also to own not only your data, but kind of own assets within this metaverse. And so what that looks like is you can own a avatar and take it with you from platform to platform rather than it being kind of stuck in that platform. And not only is it portable and you can take it with you, but you can also sell it and profit from it because it is a asset that you own and not another company owns. And that kind of gets back to the basis of all of this, which is digital scarcity. And that is a new kind of invention with cryptocurrency and blockchain, is that it enables finite digital assets to exist, whether they're fungible or non-fungible tokens. And that's kind of the basis of all of this. NFTs, you've probably heard a little bit about them, but broadly what they are is a unique token that is stored on a blockchain. And so it is not like Bitcoin or Ethereum that is not unique. Every NFT has some unique attributes to it that make it non-fungible. But it is stored on a blockchain in a form of crypto kind of technology. Currently, it's represented mainly through art. So what you've seen a lot of is pictures, whether they're avatars, like you can see a couple on the right, Bored Ape Yacht Club and CryptoPunks, or whether it's more high-end fine art, like that bottom photo, which is Ringers by Dmitry Cherniak. Or there are actually some that are, it's kind of so the other three that I mentioned were more common types, and that's been what's really gained prominence over the past couple of years, is especially the community-based profile picture projects, the avatars, because you can own an avatar that you identify with. But there are other kinds that are kind of popping up that are interesting, like this proof one that's over on the right. That's a membership pass. So it's kind of a membership to a community. And it either provides some sort of utility or community aspects. But NFTs are not limited to just pictures or membership passes. They can encompass a lot of different things, basically anything you can think of that could be unique and stored on chain, like mortgages or even like titles to homes and things like that. That could all be NFTs. Metaverse, you hear it thrown around a lot. I think we're probably more in the metaverse than you already realize through social media. That's a form of the metaverse. What Web3 does differently is that because you can take your assets with you, you can, these different platforms can be interconnected. And over time, you'd expect them to be kind of more and more immersive and, more interconnected than they are. But we're already kind of on the spectrum of, moving towards the metaverse. That's kind of high level. Joel, if you have anything to add there.
No, I think that's great. We wanted to tee it up with an intro to Web3 NFTs in the metaverse. Certainly, think through any questions you may have at the end. We'll tackle as many as we can, but we want to dive into, the other areas of the collector's point of view, as well as what brands are doing in the space and why we think it's important to them both now and moving forward.
Yeah, so Joel and I both are collectors in the space. That's kind of how I ended up moving into building a marketplace, was I just was playing around with NFTs and trading them and collecting them. And so there's kind of a few different ways that we would look at NFTs as collectors and maybe what interests us about NFTs, at least in their current state. So kind of high level, when you buy an NFT, you can either buy it directly from the artist when they've created it, and that's called minting the NFT. It actually solidifies it and stores it on chain, that it is now released and you own it. And that is, you're minting it from the original collection. It's also could be, described as the primary market. And so that's where you're buying from, like a completely new collection that hasn't been released before. And then there's the secondary market, that is where basically you're, buying and selling from other people who have already bought it. So it's a place where you can go trade NFTs. So think like eBay, where you can go trade your used items, or something that you have, some collectible that you have, you can trade it. Kind of look at those in different ways. You have to assess them. Now, this is from a collector and trader standpoint, but not any sort of advice to go on and trade for financial purposes. But we look at this in two different ways. When you're minting a work, you kind of have to look at the team and who's behind it. Joel and I both, and a lot of other people in the space, have a preference towards teams that you actually know their names and who they are, and they have a proven track record in the real world. Because part of the beauty of this Web3 world is you don't have to have kind of an in real life identity tied to yourself. But when you're, so you can be pseudonymous or anonymous, and those kind of projects have worked out some in the past, but more often than not, you're better off going with a team that, you know who they are, and they've been willing to kind of put themselves and their personal reputation out there behind their project. A lot of this is more than just, the art and what you think is interesting about it, like looking wise. It's what comes with it, like community aspects and different types of utility that an NFT could provide, like gameplay, other sorts of entertainment that it could provide. So that's something you would look for. And then, all that goes together to kind of blend into like that you actually like it, you actually like the piece you're looking at, that you actually like, what it provides, regardless of whether the price for it goes up or down. Then you have the secondary market, which is more analytical, where you're actually buying something that the market has put to the test, and you've been able to see how it's reacted to this collection that is out there. And so there's all sorts of different ways to look at this. Have a few things there, and you can see on the right, those are typical types of analytical dashboards that people use to assess whether they should buy these out the secondary market or not. And so that's a different type of analysis that you're looking at. The first, when you're minting, is more qualitative. Secondary market's more quantitative. The third point there we have is, you can be a trader or a collector or both here. A lot of people are in the space to try to flip NFTs and make a profit. A lot of people are here because they enjoy the communities they get to be a part of and just want to hold for the long term. And some people do a little bit of both. So yeah, it's kind of how people collecting and trading in the space, at a high level would look at these different ways of buying or collecting.
One thing I would add to this idea of the reason we probably have a preference for proven teams and docs teams, as they say, people that have done something in the real world, even if it's not exactly this. Early on, a lot of the projects that were coming out were truly just almost art projects. They were really projects, but as the space started maturing and growing, and it still has a long way to go, trust me, many of these raise so much money that it's now not just a project, it's a business. So certainly in my mind, I feel like it helps to have somebody that knows how to manage those funds, can build a team, scale a team, and take a product to market and evolve that product. So those are the reasons, certainly, why having somebody that's, built a business in the real world, I think helps. It is by no means a necessary thing. Like, we're just talking about, there have been teams that did not have that and have done well, but in a market that I would consider very speculative and still early at the moment. It's certainly something that it's a good criteria to help you weed out various things, considering how much there's in the space. All right, so now we're going to talk about brands. So this is something I spent a lot of time thinking about. I got into the space for personal curiosity and interest, but my work for the last 10 years has been working with brands. And while these worlds at the moment haven't fully overlapped, they are starting to get closer and closer every day. So, obviously NFT market has blown up. Everybody's talking about it. Every brand is now thinking, what are they going to do in this space? Should they be in this space, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to highlight some reasons why they're starting to get in this space, why this is meaningful and important to them. And we can have a conversation about this. So when you think about an NFT, I think it's more important to think about the technology behind it, right? So it's essentially a smart contract. It just happens to have some sort of artistic file or representation. It could literally be any file, it could be a music file. But what that smart contract allows you to do is to build in perpetual royalties for that particular asset or collection of assets. If you think about Nike and the fact that they were never getting any secondary revenue for sales that happened beyond the initial sale, and Stockx would get some of that, or the individual person selling the sneaker would get that. To somebody like a Nike, where they can now create a perpetual market off sales of digital assets that they can also give you physical versions of that asset, this starts getting really, really interesting. For creators themselves, creating perpetual markets is very compelling. Think about a musician, think about a digital artist or traditional artist. This is probably one of the biggest points in the space. But again, you have to have demand for what you're doing for that to even matter. Second, I would say this digital innovation and product development lifecycle, it's much more efficient than doing something physically. You don't have to worry about the supply chain issues that are plaguing the world at the moment. You can prototype something, build it out, and go to market significantly faster. That's really, really big. So you now have a situation where you can have a perpetual market. You can do product development much faster and go live in market faster. You also have a direct relationship with some key customers, so people that are very loyal and or financially invested in what you're doing. And you can now create token gated experiences and engagement with them. So whether you're Nike or Pepsi or whoever, if I know who these customers are, all of a sudden, say Pepsi, they have access to all sorts of different talent and they're sponsors of many events. They could provide them, the token holders, almost a VIP experience behind the scenes, whether it's virtual or IRL, to meet those artists, to have a behind the scenes conversation, to get behind the scenes content, to get access to pre-sale of certain tickets. There's a million things they can do. This now amplifies their ability to have a relationship and reward key customer segments. They can also airdrop things to you, and we can touch on that, but that's essentially when they send you something for free, whether it's a token or an NFT. And the main reason why a project does that, or a brand in this case would do that, is either, or a combination of these things, it's to reward their current holders and to create a new lower entry point for new people that are trying to get into the space. And that can help, again, spin the wheel of perpetual markets for them. New customer segments is a really interesting one that I like to talk about for a sec, just because if you're like a Gucci or Louis Vuitton, really high-end luxury brand, like you had a very specific customer segment, and a lot of other people were never able to get access to your product or brand. Now, you could offer just a digital version of your brand and bring your customer, call it average age and income even, down. You can give them an experience with your brand much earlier in life that's digitally only. And maybe that could even allow them the opportunity to get something physically, but they're now able to have a relationship with customers much greater than what they could previously. And this idea of verifiable ownership and authenticity, it's all tied to a smart contract. They know exactly who has a real version of the thing versus a fake version. Just like there's fake bags in the real world, there's going to be fake NFTs in the space too. But they can see exactly which ones are tied to the smart contract they developed, so they know what's real and what's not, and they reward that which is real. Just like Daniel was talking about earlier, this idea of Web3 can recognize and reward ownership. That's important here. So now we'll just dive into some examples. I'll try to go through some of these quickly so we have time for questions, but Burrito Maze, this is something that Chipotle did within Roblox last year. And it was a really interesting concept, and certainly the first that I had seen of a restaurant giving you a metaverse-like experience. Roblox certainly is still considered Web 2, but it's got about as much of an immersive environment. It's about as close to a metaverse experience, I would say, as you have right now, that and Fortnite. But they allowed you to essentially dress up in a Halloween-like outfit within the ecosystem, go into their store, and you were able to claim essentially a free entree or some sort of discount that you would use via their application or IRL in their stores. So they were driving sales of products in the real world via somebody logging in and having this experience with them in Roblox. That's really interesting. I think you're going to start seeing more of that. The next one is VFriends. So VFriends is a Web3 native brand developed by Gary Vaynerchuk. They've done a lot of really interesting things, but what I'll highlight here is this partnership with Mattel was towards the end of the year. VFriends had already built themselves up to be a meaningful and important player in the space up to this point. So there was demand behind it. They partnered with Mattel to create this limited edition Uno game, which I look at as a significant win-win for both sides of the market. Mattel is able to get a new customer base that probably had not thought about their products forever. And this validated the VFriends community by giving them something in the real world tied to an iconic IP, in this case, the game of Uno, with their brand. And this to me is just the beginning of, licensing deals that are going to happen in this space moving forward. Few others to highlight here. You're starting to see a lot with events. And I think that's actually probably one of the most prominent and obvious use cases, but the NBA actually currently is auctioning off tickets. Though they call them NBA All-Star VIP passes. These are one of ones, one per team. They're all going for significant amounts of money. As you can imagine, a courtside ticket costs quite a bit. It is a very specific customer segment, but this allows this person to have all sorts of benefits, including on the court, a little bit of a game with the player, backstage meet and greet, like a really robust experience that they're able to reward, again, almost like the top of the top fans of each particular team. Sports teams are also starting to have NFL, for example, is starting to have tickets for games more and more moving forward. So just like a proof of attendance protocol, these are called POAPs, where you attend an event and you get an NFT back. That's going to be pretty commonplace, where you're going to now have a digital proof of attending a concert or any particular sporting event or things like that moving forward. And they could then reward that. They could say, if you've attended at least 3 or 4 of our games, proven by the POAPs or NFTs you have in your wallet that you would have received, maybe you're now able to have first dibs at season tickets next year or something to that extent. Coachella did a lifetime collection, essentially. Anybody that bought these keys has lifetime tickets to Coachella. The Hundreds, which is an apparel brand in the streetwear space, their project is called Atom Bomb Squad. And recently, towards the end of last year, they did something where they had a token gated shopping experience where if you had one of their NFTs, you were able to purchase limited edition apparel that people that did not have that NFT were not able to purchase. And that works particularly well in the streetwear space or even sneaker market for that matter. Not only were they able to purchase a physical version of that, they actually allowed you to purchase a digital version as well. So your IRL self could match your digital self. And then they hosted a party in Decentralized, so they had a whole metaverse experience within it. And then the last example I'll highlight here, and I won't go too in depth, but Nike acquired Artifact Studios at the end of last year. This was very meaningful in the space, and I bet made many executives across the country and maybe even the world think about, what are we going to do in the space? Are we going to acquire somebody? Are we behind? All the questions. This was important for a lot of different reasons, but it certainly showed some validation from a major player like Nike. Again, we talked about this example of perpetual markets within secondary sales of sneakers as being important. This to me is one of the most obvious buys that I've seen in the space. But one thing I wanted to highlight is they're not just creating a one-off campaign. They're not just saying, oh, here's a PFP project and like, good luck. They're creating an entire ecosystem, and this ecosystem feeds and supports itself, therefore keeping the community highly engaged and really rewarding those people. This PodX ecosystem and that monolith box, those were all airdrops for free to people that had the holders. They're also, especially the PodX ecosystem, think of it as a blank canvas. Those are empty spaces that they're giving you. And the community is now building on top of that and creating their own small businesses, creating essentially NFTs for the space, whether it's in digital furniture or experiences or all sorts of different things. So, and they're going to develop a wearables marketplace as well. So you're going to have digital fashion become a major thing here. We're already seeing that happening in Fortnite, and we believe this is going to extend here as well. So we can go to the last slide. And these are just some points that we had as things we believe could be coming soon. Won't dive into all these, but I'll kick it over to Daniel to maybe touch on some, and we want to open it up to questions.
Yeah, I think, one thing that we'll see, and kind of alluded to it earlier with the membership passes, I think we'll see creators and influencers monetizing in a different way via NFTs, differently than they were able to kind of in Web 2. So podcasters, Instagram influencers, TikTok influencers, being able to release an NFT that allows them to have kind of a gated community with their biggest fans and provide extra utility and just fun things to them. I think NFT collections will also spawn new influencers and new brands. We've already seen this with Bored Ape Yacht Club. They've become a huge brand, and the IP that they've created will likely extend into decades to come. Given what this momentum they've gained so far, I think we'll see gaming become more integrated with NFTs. It's a very, very good use case for NFTs, and being able to port your players and NFTs from different game to game. I think we'll just see a lot more development on that front, and then a lot of more like in real life use cases with music and tickets and live events. There's a lot of use cases there. Basically anything where you need to prove you are the rightful owner to something, whether it's a seat or the rights to royalties on music. NFTs are a good use case for that. Yeah, we'll open it up to questions now, unless Joel has anything to add on the coming soon.
Yeah, I think the only build I would say, just like you mentioned Bored Ape Yacht Club as its own IP, whether it's them or other collections, you're starting to see literally the collections of these NFTs start to get represented by major talent agencies. So they are looking at them from this essentially avatar is going to be an influencer. This avatar is probably going to make cameos in their own shows or other people's shows, and that they're truly going to be looked at as talent themselves. I think that's an important thing, and they will extend into traditional merchandising via licensing deals, whether it's apparel, backpacks, shoes, all the above. It's going to be a select few that do that. Certainly most won't, but the ones that make meaningful traction and progress in the space certainly will.
I believe you can unmute yourself. So if you have any troubles doing that, but if you'd like to ask any questions, we definitely want to hear from you and answer anything you have.
I'll go first because our students are shy. Thank you so much, Joel, and for doing the overview. Really appreciate it. Yeah, the one, I'm just learning this space, and the one thing I keep struggling with, and maybe you can help me a little bit, is I understand how an NFT works technically, but I'm trying to understand the connection to the rule of law, right? So like anyone can really mint an NFT, and it's sort of a proof of authenticity. but can we really use it to show ownership? Do you have any thoughts on what an NFT can do functionally versus what it means in a real world that abides by laws?
Yeah, I think this gets, well, there's one question here that I don't know if we have clarity on yet, is code law. So if, if this ownership is codified via a smart contract, is that legally, also qualifying for ownership? The interesting thing is you can in the metadata for these NFTs, as the creator, the artist, you can assign a package of rights to owners. Now, a lot of NFT projects, I don't think technically do this. They'll just say you have these rights. But you could assign those rights in the metadata saying, like if you are the holder of this, the artist kind of releases all the IP rights. And this kind of wades into legal waters that I'm not as familiar with. I'm more familiar with the technical side and kind of how the metadata is structured. But you've seen some projects like Cryptodes. They were the first ones to do a CCO license, which kind of broke the barrier. A lot have done that since, which basically said, hey, anyone can make any derivative off of this. It doesn't matter whether you own it or not. You can make a derivative project and it can be commercially used. So there's not a ton of clarity on that, I guess, but there are ways to assign rights.
I'll build on this a little bit. You're starting to see this get more solidified as brands are getting into the space naturally. So Nike has actually filed for many different trademarks and patents and everything to literally solidify certain parts of their ecosystem that they're developing, and they're assigning certain rights to some of the tokens that they're, in some cases they're giving you limited commercial rights or no rights at all on certain things. But to them, like they're the primary, the originator, if you will, of their collection. So they know what's real or what's not based on what ties back to their contract. So they can determine and assign added value or experiences, access or whatever, based on what goes back to their contract. So Nike is an example. I think the NBA certainly was very tight on this. Whenever they did something with Dapper Labs, like they do not assign any licensing rights. Those I truly think more as a almost collectibles, like a traditional card market, like Michael Jordan basketball cards or things like that, where the NBA retained the rights. They just allowed people to have moments within the space that could give them access to other things. Now, that gets into a whole narrative of closed ecosystems versus open ecosystems, like Dapper Labs and the NBA. That's a closed ecosystem. It is what I would consider a more brand safe environment, but it also limits the liquidity opportunity because you're not in the broader market, and it limits what you're able to do because you're limited to that ecosystem. What Nike is doing is in an open marketplace. Same thing with Adidas. Adidas has a partnership with Bored Apes that is in the open marketplace. They can play with any stack in the ecosystem and truly do what they want. So those, as more brands get into the space, you're starting to see more of that, what I'll put as like they're being very rigid and thoughtful about that. If you read the terms and conditions and legal side of any of these Nike collections, they're pretty dense.
Thank you so much. And you do know a lot about Nike. Do you think they're going to win their lawsuit against Stockx?
An interesting question. I think,
and maybe you want to tell the audience what that is in case they don't know what that is.
Yeah. So long story short, Stockx decided to launch a collection of NFTs that essentially said, here's NFTs, and they displayed Nike shoes, coincidentally, and they said, this is not, like it became almost like a security that said, you have this shoe in our vault. You can burn the NFT and claim the physical shoe, or you can keep this and know that we're keeping a version of that shoe for you in our vault. Now, Nike essentially is suing them, to simplify it, saying you're using our shoes to sell your NFT. That's not okay. That's our IP and our trademark. So it's interesting. I don't know how it'll play out, but certainly they have a lot to stand on, because like they have, those are protected brands within the Nike portfolio. There's a lot of question though of like, were they protected as a digital asset or not? Like, I'm not sure. Like, all of this is going to become more important moving forward. Every single brand is going to start making sure that they have very clear usage rights and regulations associated with digital assets moving forward. So Catherine just put a question. So tips for students who want to mint NFTs or implement them in a potential use case. How does the process work from a practical standpoint, and where should they get started? Favorite resources. So various things here. I'll take a stab at it first. So tips, there's a lot to dive into and learn in this space, so it can be very overwhelming, and I certainly went through that journey myself. Start following people that you like and respect in the space. And, you know, I think some easy follows might be like Kevin Rose and frankly, probably anybody that he's posting about in others. But start finding people that are legitimate in the space, if you will, for lack of a better way to put it, and just start absorbing information first. I would tell you, crawl, walk, and then run. Don't run right away. There's still a lot of, I would say, security concerns in this space. So that's why I tell people to approach it very cautiously, but start just absorbing the information and getting a sense of what do you like, and why do you care about that thing? Do you just think it's interesting? Do you like the access that it gives you? Like, there's a lot of reasons that where you might want to do that. But I would say, start absorbing the information. Certainly set up a MetaMask sooner rather than later. Do not take a picture of the seed phrase. Make sure you do not like do any of that. Keep that offsite. Get a hardware wallet sooner rather than later. And make sure you're aware of like the fact that there's a lot of phishing scams. So try to like block DMs, or whenever you're on Discord. These are just basic security practices. I would highly advise you to do that. And I tell you that first, just because I would hate for anybody to go into the space and lose anything they build up and then, be disenfranchised or hurt financially in any way. But I would say setting up a MetaMask is really good, and maybe find a low-cost project that you believe in. Some certainly have a bigger collection size, and get into that Discord. I would say that's probably one of the best things. My learning started accelerating significantly the moment I dove into particular Discords and even Twitter. Like, I wasn't using Twitter for years, but I now use Twitter every day, and I go into Discord every day. So that's high level. I feel like that was a lot of rambling, but what do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, I think, definitely take the proper security precautions and walk before you run. Learn how to use MetaMask securely. Learn if you're not familiar with moving Ethereum around, learn how to do that, how to get Ethereum, how to move it to your MetaMask, all of that. And definitely when you're looking at projects, first, just get the foundational knowledge of what all's out there. Joel mentioned Kevin Rose. His podcast Proof is great. He has a lot of good artists on there that and just really good for foundational NFT knowledge. And then definitely stick with a lower cost project to start. One that is completely inconsequential price wise. Otherwise, the first one that I bought was not that, and it made it hard because you were too worried about what the price was doing and didn't get to just explore what the community was about. But that really is the only way you'll kind of learn what makes for a good community and what doesn't, is jumping into these different Discords. And some of these Discords, you can jump into them without owning an NFT. There's just certain channels that you don't have access to. So
I'm glad you said that. I was actually going to double down on that. There are Discord channels that I'm in that I like. I'm on the Bored Ape Yacht Club and Punk's Discord, and I don't own either one of them. So why am I in there? because they're meaningful collections in this space, and I like seeing what people in this space are talking about. So you won't have access to the token gated only if you're an owner channels, but you'll have access to a lot. Absorb that, like try to like, there's a reason some of those projects got to where they are, learn from that. I think that's really, really good advice. And I think other projects you may want to look into, just try to find some of the ones that have been around for a while. And there's some of these communities are super good about like onboarding new people, and the meta key I found to be a really good one to onboard people to Decentraland specifically, and learning how to like you know, dive into the space and use it, so you'll get more metaverse knowledge there. There's various ones like that, but I would look into the prominent projects to kind of learn what they're up to, and you know, use the search feature within there. Like you can certainly communicate with them, but like sometimes when I was trying to figure out what hardware wallet I wanted, I typed in Ledger, Trezor, and things like that in multiple channels, and I just kind of took in the information of what were people saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say before you buy anything, join those discords and kind of get a feel and lay of the land and ask any questions you want to. And a good way to explore those is if you go to OpenC, which is, I don't know if we mentioned this, but it's the main marketplace for Ethereum-based NFTs, the biggest ecosystem. If you go there and go to their top collections page and look at all-time, you know, all-time volume traded, you'll see the top projects of all time. And you can just click on those and go to their Twitter, and then from their Twitter, go to their Discord. So it's an easy way to go find like these well-established projects and communities.
Yep, no, I think that's really good. And then if you want to keep up with what we're up to, certainly for me, I think I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So you can just add me, Joel Ponce, on LinkedIn, or heyjoelponce.com. And I intend to probably write more and post via some sort of newsletter soon-ish. So keep up with that there. You can actually read about my journey into this space in a LinkedIn article I posted if you want to do that as well. So that's the best way to keep up with me.
Yeah, if you want to keep up with me, it's not on LinkedIn. So I pretty much live on Twitter and Discord. You can follow me at PlutusBTC on Twitter. That's my pseudonym, and that's what people in the space know me by. You can, if you want to, look at kind of lower priced NFTs. You can look at Byzantium and check out the NFTs there. It's a good place to get started, and I can be your Stockx NFT Sherpa if you're looking at NFTs there. And you can find me on Discord as well once you found me on Twitter. So that's where I am, and I'll put my username in here for Twitter. But yeah, that's kind of day in, day out. I'm full time on Byzantium right now, so that's what I'm doing and where you can find me.
Yeah, I hope that was helpful for everyone, but reach out if anyone has any questions. We're always happy to help. We enjoyed talking about this, just like Daniel said earlier.
I've got a quick question if you have time for one or two more.
All right, yeah.
I'm curious how you guys value art projects, whether they're completely on chain or off chain. You know, most of the NFTs have just hashes on the chain, but there's a few artists I understand that have managed to get all the data on the chain. And I wonder if you guys personally value those more. They seem more real to me. And for those projects that aren't on chain, how do you feel about how do you feel about long-term NFT storage?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, because there's a misconception. I think a lot of times that all of this data is stored on chain, because 99% of the projects, it's not that way. It's just we don't have the capability right now with the current way it is. So where all of this information, all the images are stored is usually on IPFS, which is a decentralized storage mechanism. There are some projects that I know that were kind of the first to store, to do everything on chain and do it generatively. Those have historical significance, and we didn't touch on this much from a collector standpoint, but any project that is the first to do something or one of the first to do something, it sounds funny because the space hasn't been around for long, but it will have and does have historical significance. So you'll value it more because of that. I do value less projects that don't freeze their metadata. So this is actually the whole reason that I started building a marketplace. Was there was a marketplace in our space that would build projects and then store them on Amazon S3. So basically, if they stopped paying the Amazon bill, all your metadata and images would be gone. And so if you don't store the data on IPFS, or if you do and you allow like the smart contract to be able to change it, I personally value that less, because you could have a bad actor that either is on that project or gets a hold of the private keys for that project and wipes the metadata. So that's a good question.
One more question for me. I'm a huge Kevin Rose fan as well, and this might be too personal of a question, so feel free to decline. Did you guys happen to acquire a proof token? And if so, how has it worked out, the interaction with Rose?
I did. I missed the Met and bought one right after the Met was over. Just sold it. But it was a fun group to be a part of. So there was definitely some seller's remorse in selling it, but happy with
Rose is the real deal, isn't he?
Oh yeah, for sure. He delivers. And that's
so.
the thing is he only, I mean, for those of you that are, that want more background on it, basically that was the proof membership that I was talking about earlier. And basically when he launched it, he just said, hey, you're going to get access to this Discord community, and I'm going to try to provide a lot of value to you outside of that. But there were no concrete promises. So you just kind of trust that by his reputation, you knew that he would deliver. But he certainly has, and I'm sure he will continue to.
Yeah, and that's actually a good thing to build upon, in the sense that Doc's person, you know who he is. He's done meaningful things in the space. He's well connected in the space. Like, nothing's a guarantee, but when you see, like, there's a lot of good signs when you saw that. That was probably my biggest miss last year. I certainly tried to get it, but at the last minute it sold out, and I did not get it on the secondary because I went off to do other things. But Daniel made that play better than me for sure.
But it's definitely, I think, Joel hit that nail on the head there. Like, if someone who has done meaningful things and has a reputation to uphold is getting behind a project, I mean, it depends on who they are, but you can bet that they're going to want to maintain that reputation. And so, especially with Kevin Rose being embedded in the NFT ecosystem, he was going to have to try as hard as he could to make sure that he delivered on that value.
Yeah, and don't stress if you do miss something, by the way. I could think this is important, just because there's so many things happening all the time that it's impossible to see everything. It's impossible to get everything, certainly now, because there's more demand for everything. I would advise not chasing things. That's the reason I didn't ultimately do that one. Like, I tend to avoid chasing a price that's already running. Just not interested. There's plenty of other things that are going to happen, and I don't need to make a play every day or every week for that matter. Like, if I do a few good things the whole year, I'll be good. Yeah,
that's a very good point. To kind of protect yourself financially in the space. You're going to see, if you're on Twitter, you're going to see, because of the way their algorithms work, you're going to see a lot of winners, and you're going to feel like, oh man, everyone else is just knocking it out of the park on these, NFT trades that they're doing or what they're buying. But don't let that make you, get into anything you shouldn't, or chase anything that's gone up a lot in price that you don't really want and really want the access to. Just remember that there's two sides to that coin, and you just need to make sure that you're buying something because you actually want it, not because you see other people making money on it.
Yep. I see Siri asked a question too, so I'll answer this and touch on something that I think is important associated with this. So essentially, the question is around like, you know, you're trying to launch something and how to almost bring exposure and, you know, visibility to what you're doing. The side tip, and then we'll get back to that precisely, is anybody that has already built a community prior to this happening has a huge leg up here, or anybody that is a good community builder and is able to build a community, even if you haven't already, has a big leg up here. Community building is proving to be one of the most valuable skill sets in this space. So I would say that's important. Like if you're able to find those that like similar things that you like, or similar art styles, or whatever that is, like there's an article, it's an age-old article, but it's called The 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly. It's a great article. Don't try to be everything for everybody. Try to, you know, do something that is meaningful and important to you, as well as, you know, connects with people and means something to people. So almost, you know, find your tribe. And the space is very supportive, but admittedly, I will tell you, there's so much supply at the moment that I'm seeing various things, even some, you know, at times seemingly good things get overlooked. Don't feel any type of way about that. I know that's hard to do. Just try to find allies in the space, build your connections of people that maybe can help elevate your work, and, you know, post within communities. And I think that will come to you naturally as you're engaging in the ecosystem.
Oh, thank you. That really helps. Yeah, so I always think of like last semester, I'm a student of the University of Arkansas right now, and my concentration is in blockchain. So we were exploring some of the tools, and yeah, when we open OpenC and see, we really see some very common artwork which are being sold for really good price and all. So yeah, we often think about it, but not sure on how to really start. We often thought about just, you know, putting our artwork and going with the flow, but not thought about, you know, building that community. I guess that really matters and really helps. Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, well, we can take any last questions, or we can just all thank Joel and Daniel so much for their time. Really tight, beautiful presentation. You did so well. I think you explained a really complex concept in a way that most people can understand. So I just want to thank you guys so much on behalf of the Blockchain Center of Excellence, and all of our students who attended, and also will be watching this on rebroadcast on YouTube. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to blab about NFTs. So
Awesome. Take care, everyone.
thank you.
And Daniel, could you just send over that recording?